Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of The Magicians. Such a good episode with so much to talk about. So obviously, we're going to start from the very beginning. I appreciate that opening because for one, it put a lot of things in perspective. For one, the whole Julia situation, I didn't realize because I didn't understand okay, why can't you take more than one shade out? I don't get that. Maybe I missed something last episode, but this episode to clarify, it's because to bring a shade back to the living world, they have to be inside of somebody's body, and the only person without a shade is Julia. She's the only available host. Granted, I'm sure they could have easily grabbed someone else, but obviously with their time restraint and everything, it wouldn't have been possible. I mean, that would have also meant preventing someone else who didn't have a shade. You would have tracked down someone who didn't have a shade, plus also having to make sure that person's okay with leaving their shade behind. That type of, it was just kind of like a spur of the moment. We have very limited time left to do this, so. And so, because it didn't click in my mind until Julia was like, "Yeah, I'm going to miss feeling what it's like to have a shade." I'm like, "What do you?" I was like, "Oh, Alice's shade is inside you." That's now it all clicks and makes sense. So obviously they work with Mayakovsky, which I think literally last episode I was asking, I was like, "Yo, what's up with that whole storing magic thing?" Which he helps them end up bringing Alice back, because it is something I didn't even think about that Quentin brought up. Obviously, he's like, the fact of the matter is, he's like, Alice is, it's like the fact is this is the least you can do for Alice, because he brings up the fact is, the whole Emily and him situation. Emily being in love with you and being, not being able to, be with you led to her doing what she did, which led to Charlie helping her, which caused him to become a Niffin. And that's the only reason why Alice was at Break Bills in the first place, trying to help her brother. Basically in the sense, basically saying, Mayakovsky, you kind of helped the dominoes fall to let things play out this way. So you're partially responsible for Alice. The fact is, I didn't even think about it. I was like, right, Mayakovsky must have known exactly who Alice was the entire time. That's something I'm going to have to go back to that episode and notice, did he treat Alice any differently? Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. Because I'm sure he knows ahead of time what happened to Charlie, knew her last name and knew Charlie's last name and everything. Probably knew Alice's. I mean, granted, he spends most of his time drinking. That's kind of like a correlation with everything that's happened, kind of being shipped off, from Break Bills to this particular place. And I think he's located in Antarctica. I can't remember. I think that's where he is. But, all for the sake of what he did. So I guess in some way, because Mayakovsky's like, Quentin's like, okay, yeah, you're a jerk, and you tell me I'm a piece of crap. I'm this. You kind of always belittle me and everything. But I got up and I went out there and I did stuff. And the fact of the matter is, Alice became the situation way because she sacrificed herself to save everyone. So the least you can do, as someone who's slightly responsible for her, as a teacher as well, you should do something. So using some of the magic he has stored up, he ended up helping Alice and her shade come back together. And now Alice is back to life. Granted, she is not happy about being back to life for multiple reasons. One, she can't actually do magic right now either, because it's like Mayakovsky explains it as she's a newborn baby, kind of like she's a newborn again. So it's like she has to work her way, kind of similar to Penny's situation to a slightly degree, but she has to kind of work her way back up to doing magic. More so than anything, she's pissed at Quentin because it's like, for her, she had access to all this knowledge. We still don't know what happens with that whole what's his name? That friar dude that she went off to kind of train with or whatever. We don't know where that situation came about. I'm sure. I'm wondering, will that be something that kind of comes up, in the next episode? Obviously, I'll get to that later if I remember to, because I have a terrible memory and I'll probably end up forgetting to bring that up later. But nevertheless, all the knowledge she acquired, but because she's back to being a human, all of it's slipping away, because as this ethereal being, you have access to all this knowledge, and it's just like unlimited power and knowledge can pour into you. But now that she's human again, it's slowly fading away. So she's trying to write it all down, and she's like pissed. She's like, I had everything at the tip of my fingers. But Mayakovsky puts in perspective for her. He's like, the fact of the matter is, being human is better than being what you were, because being what you were is like, oh, everything's perfect, you have no worries. That's boring. Being a human is a challenge, because the world is shitty, and the fact of the matter is, what makes life worth living. The fact is, you're alive, and that means something, that you have a life that's worth living, that you can take this life to make the world a little less shitty. That's the purpose of humans. You won't make life that much less crappy, but at the very least, even by 1%, if you can do that, then at least your life means something. Give meaning to your life. Don't you've been given a second chance. Don't waste it. There's a lot more, because she looks at humans like, oh, we're pathetic meat sack beings, essentially. It's just like, oh, it's disgusting, I'm back in his body again. But the fact of the matter is like you've been given this opportunity. And even Quentin later on is like, the fact is, I'm sorry that I know you're probably pissed at me and you have every right to be, but he's like, I'm not going to apologize for the fact of bringing you back to life because this world is a lot better off with. Because let's not forget, like, Alice is a very gifted magician. So it's like, yeah, the world is better off with her in it. Everyone's better off with her in it. So he's like, I'm not, he's like, I understand if you're pissed at me and everything, but that's the lay of the land. So what we also ended up dealing with in this episode is also the fact is that obviously you had Elliot coming to Quentin and obviously finding out the button situation. And obviously Quentin's dealing with the Alice situation, but Elliot's like, I need to get back to Fillory. So there is one last way to get back to Fillory. It's a clock. Kind of nice that they pulled it back. It's like the clock that was in that place that Quentin goes to at the beginning, where he actually first bumps into Jane. She was trying to get him to go to Breakbills. But that clock obviously got sold to some dude, and then Elliot and Quentin go to check out this dude. It seems like this dude is like a big Fillory nerd like Quentin, and you even have Elliot being like, oh, there's another one and everything. But then he lets something slip that he shouldn't know about, and then Quentin's like, oh, you've been to Fillory or something. He's like, what? No, what? And then it's revealed, it's like, oh, he's got horns like Ember. Oh, because he's Umber. He didn't die. He faked his death and has been living. They're pointing it up like, you've been living in Canada this entire time. You left the beast to do whatever he wanted to, and you came to live here mainly because him and Martin came to a deal. He'll go ahead and let everyone think he's dead, but Martin knew the entire time that. But I guess as long as Umber wasn't interfering, because Umber ran away because he was scared. He was like, go ahead, do whatever you want to. And he's here trying to start a new world. He's like, I call it Cuba. And then you have Elliot being like, that's already a place. He's like, what? Really? He's like, yeah. Are you sure about it? I'm fairly certain. He's like, oh, well, that's sad. It explains a lot because we kind of get a little more perspective into how Fillory works. That basically Ember and Umber represent chaos and order. Umber represents the order of the world, and Ember represents the chaos of it. That's why things have been running the way they have been. It's because of Ember. He's kind of been running the world by himself without any restraint, without Umber there to kind of balance it out. So all the bad stuff that's been happening in the world is because of him. And the thing is, because I was wondering, the question was still why did Elliot get kicked out? Was it because he was a bad king? No, it's actually because he was trying to do a good job is why he got kicked out. Because Ember, he enjoys chaos, and the fact is Elliot was trying to fix it, the whole turning people into rats and stuff. That was him too. Every problem that's been popping up in Fillory is because of him. That's most likely why he took a dump in the Wellspring. It wasn't necessarily to stop Martin. It was more so than anything just to cause more problems for Fillory, because it wasn't even just for Fillory. That caused problems everywhere, even on Earth. I'm sure all the other worlds were affected by it too, magic browning out everywhere. But that was all him trying to cause chaos because he enjoys it. So eventually he's keeping himself entertained with all this stuff that's happening in and there. It makes you wonder, could he also be behind what the fairies are doing, trying to take Finn's baby? For him, this is all the way they bring it, it's almost like a soap opera, or no, I think they use the word telenovela. Obviously similar things, but still, I say similar, but I'm pretty sure they're the exact same thing, just minor differences. But nevertheless, it's to him, it's like a TV show, and so he's enjoying it. But eventually he'll just get bored of it, and because he's a god, he can literally snap his fingers and end it all. So that makes you wonder, because it was something that Quentin had put in perspective too. He's like, the fact of the matter is, it's your fault this all happened. He's like, you kind of created the beast because Martin was trying to get away from his terrible situation, but you wouldn't let him in. Why? Just because I guess he felt because Martin's whole situation would have caused some problems here in Fillory or whatever. And it's because of that, because of being molested and taken advantage of by the person that was supposed to take care of him, it led him to becoming a monster that he was. So it's Fillory's state is also on you. But the fact is that Umber still, he's like, fine, I'll help you get to Fillory, but the fact of the matter is, I won't do anything about it. The fact of the matter is, you better be careful around Ember, because he's in a state of mind where he's just kind of at any point in time, he will just snap and just kill everybody if he destroy that world if he sees fit to. It seems like he's kind of borderlining on that point where it's just he's only kept it on, because it makes you wonder, because that was a question, where the hell has Ember been this entire time? Constantly this time I will be getting their names right. For the longest time, I've always constantly got their names mixed up. I call Ember Umber and Umber Ember. I just always kept getting it confused, but now I got it so much clearer in my head. I'm sure I would make a mistake again nevertheless. But that's why he hasn't been around, because he's been in the background just watching everything unfold. It's like, oh, look at you little humans trying to fix. Oh, you're so cute, trying to fix Fillory. Oh, you're doomed. But that's why he kicked Elliot out, because Elliot was doing a good job. Which Elliot starts thinking, okay, so how you want to do this? Obviously, we got to fix Fillory and stuff and everything that's going down. Probably track Umber down, capture him, possibly kill him. Which that seems like that's not likely an option, because as we learn in this episode, obviously I'll dive into a little bit more later on, but the fact is there are consequences to killing a god. But there might be a situation where they're forced to kill Ember. It's like either kill him or Fillory dies, and along with him, magic. But at the same time, it's like, Quentin's like, yeah, you don't want to do that, because you doing what you're thinking of doing, it's literally the same thing that Martin Chatwin did. And it's like, that would make you no different than the Beast. And he's like, right. So obviously they're going to have to try and find a different solution to this. All the while in Fillory, you have Josh becoming the next king, because he's the only human left, from Earth. So it's like the throne kind of passes, the crown passes to him. He's the new High King, which is like, for him, that means barking out orders and getting high. And he's also getting the other guys high too. And he's like, oh, do this and that. He even breaks up the other thrones, obviously because they're cursed, and kind of makes his own. And so everything's kind of running fine and dandy until Prince S pops up. It's like, where's my dad? It's like, oh, your dad's got turned into a rat. Okay. Kills the other two dudes and ends up, because basically he ended up seeing Margot, because obviously he got high, like someone had mixed the drugs that make it so you see a different world. He ended up seeing Margot, so he's supposed to get on the whole fact of trying to get Margot back as she's trying to track down Finn. He ends up seeing Finn because they end up burning a whole bunch of drugs, and Prince S and all the Lorians that are with him kind of like get knocked out from getting high and everything. So now he's traveling to the fairy world. So I'm very curious, will we actually get to see the fairy world this season or not? Maybe, maybe not. But there's that. Like, there's so much happening at once. Like, it's all coming to a head in this whole situation. And obviously, that's where we end up there. But obviously, you're going to have, like, Quentin and Elliot making their way back to Fillory. Makes you wonder what Alice, because we do see, like, it does seem like there's a little bit of what Quentin and Mayakovsky was saying kind of resonated a little bit with Alice. So he's like reminding her, it's like, you are Alice Quinn, and don't kind of, you may kind of not like your situation, but that's who you are, and that's the person that, this world is better off having. They don't need the Nif in you, they need Alice Quinn. So I get the feeling like she might be along for the ride. I don't know. I wonder is that button situation forever gone just because they gave it to that dragon? And I wonder will we see, obviously, Quentin talked to her in this episode. Obviously, we didn't get to see it, but the fact of the matter is, asked her about like a way to get to Fillory and stuff like that. So I'm wondering will we get to see more of that dragon? But on the other side of things, we had, a little more, well, it was kind of a sweet moment where Julia was like, hey, Katie, I need you to kind of be my brakes. The fact is, I don't have my shade, and I will never get it back. But the fact of the matter is, I need you to be there to kind of hold me back, to kind of show me what's right and wrong. Which Katie accepts and everything. And so they're working with John, and John's like, explains everything to them about what's happened. He's like, I want to stop my dad. So they're like, okay, the only one that can stop him is you, because as a demigod, you're the only one that can match him in power. So it's like, hey, let's train you to be a magician. Sadly, his dad found out about it and killed his wife. And presented him her ear, because to him it's supposed to set an example of like the fact is you can't fight your nature. You want to try and fight to not be me. You're disgusted by who I am, but the fact of the matter is it's a part of who you are too. That the fact of the matter is you can't change what's and using Julia for example, it's like no matter how much Julia scrubbed away, tried to do what she did, like the way I damaged her, it can never be erased. Which kind of led to a conversation between John and Julia, bringing up the whole conversation like, is he right? And the fact is Julia's like, I hope he's not, that that they can change it. They're not bound to being who they are now because of everything that's happened. And so John kind of uses his powers and makes Katie go off to eat, and he forces Katie to kill. He's like, I can't have Julia do it. She's been through so much, and the last thing I want is this to be at. She lost her shade, where she was raped by Reynard. She was got impregnated by him, had to get an abortion, ended up losing her shade. So much happened to her. And he didn't feel right asking Katie to do it, but he felt like it was the only way for two reasons. One, he didn't want to take the chance that he might end, especially because knowing, like, obviously last episode he found out, like, oh, like him, like, his entire life, he's subconsciously been using his powers as a demigod to get what he wants. And even his wife, he's like, because it puts in perspective, like, especially knowing what his dad has done, it's like, what, it begs the question, like, how am I any different? The fact is that who's to say what in our relationship between me and my wife is real, and how much of it's just my God powers activating to make her do whatever I want to. So once again, what makes me any different from his, so he didn't ever want to take the chance that he might, he wants to give Julia, like, believe that Julia has a chance to kind of recover from not having her shade, that there will be kind of a better way for her. But he's like, for him, he doesn't want to take that chance, especially with his powers. It's like the last thing the world needs is another Reynard. So he had Katie kill him. Katie kill him, because also there's not enough time to like build up, like train him to learn magic. Obviously, even as a demigod, he'd be able to learn it quickly, but not quickly enough. Reynard needs to be stopped now. And so he sacrifices himself. And so all his powers was put into a single, God-killing bullet, which, going back, now that I'm thinking about it, it's like, maybe that might be what they use for Ember. I don't know. Like, because you need light and darkness, order and chaos. So either Umber's going to have to come back to kind of bring Ember back, kind of keep him like in check, which is like, why haven't you come back? Literally, I guess to him, it's like the world is already so messed up that even if he came back, he really couldn't do much to change it. I guess that's because it's like, Martin's been dead for a while, and I'm sure he knows that Martin's dead. So, but it's like, why won't you come back now? The biggest threat is gone, but I guess now the biggest threat is your brother. So I'm wondering, is that bullet going to play some role in it? Because as we know, Julia didn't actually use it on him, because Lady Underground actually popped up, and she reveals there was like a love relationship between her and Reynard. It's that Reynard is her son. And then Julia's like, wait a minute, you mean you know what this sick bastard's been doing? It's like, of course you have. You've known what he's been doing this entire time. The reason why he's been doing everything is because he's so pissed at her. Like, he was bringing up the fact is like, oh, she has a way with gods, and then she throws him into the ground. I guess more so than anything, talking about his dad, whoever that is, and kind of left him probably like, that's all this is. Reynard isn't a jilted lover. He's a jilted son. He felt abandoned by his mother. So that gives you the excuse to do what you've been doing. And Julia's like, she wants to kill him, and she has every right to, but she's telling, like, Lady Underground, or rather Persephone, is like, don't do it, please. But at the end of the day, the choice is yours. But, the fact is that, kind of saying like that Julia's a good person, that even without her shade, she knows what's right and what's wrong. And the fact is that she, like, it makes her, by not doing this, she will be a better person for not killing him. And so she doesn't. And so last thing we see is her whispering him away, which Katie's super pissed about. She's like, the fact is, I killed John. It was all for nothing if you let Reynard go away. Which is like, you should know more so than anyone that the fact is, if Katie wasn't willing to do it, that there's a lot more to that. What he did to her, she's wanted him dead from the beginning. For her to let him go means a lot. She said, like, I think it was the right thing. And it's like, she knows more so than, because she brought it up. It's like, he killed my friend. She's like, I lost everything because of Reynard. So she knows exactly what she's doing. At least you hope so. I don't know what she's going to do to change Reynard, but it's like, man, that's not, you kind of want him dead. But once again, she said it herself, there are consequences to killing a god. Maybe not for another god, but because a god is made of massive power. We saw what happened. What was her name? Danny? Or Dana? I think it was Dana. Like, when we saw, like, her, like, John's biological mom use the spell, like, we saw the catastrophe, like, the mass amount of stuff it caused just to send Reynard away. Who's to say what will happen if you kill a god? That might be some, like, apocalypse level ramifications for killing a god. At least that's that's why I keep bringing up the point. Like, maybe, I hope it doesn't come down to, like, killing Umber, because the last thing Ember. See, I did it again. I'm so sorry. But that, I don't know. I'm very interested to see where that all goes down. Because at the same time, obviously, we go back to Penny and Sylvia's situation, which obviously we saw them entering the poison room, because there ended up being something that we learned about from their side of the story too, that basically Sylvia brought up the fact that she brought up the fact that she was reading Kanye's book, and she's like, yeah, people just don't understand. Kanye is actually very misunderstood. But she's like, I looked at the last 20 of his pages, and there's nothing. Like, she was reading about him having sex, and then there's nothing. It's like, wait, he dies having sex? It's like, no. Literally, that would be like the last page, but the fact is, there's nothing for like the last 20 pages. Apparently, it's a big thing in the library that people have been knowing about for a while now, so a lot of books are ending with like 20 pages, meaning something devastating is coming that's going to make it so that a lot of people's books are not filled up, because like the lives they were supposed to leave are kind of cut short, is what it's kind of representing whatever it is that's coming. And so Penny and Sylvia work together to get to a fountain, because apparently the poison room isn't just behind that door. It's that door is one way to it, but it's like going to another world. You know, there's a fountain for it, which Sylvia was able to unlock it. It was a pretty complex seal, and it's like she was able to break through it. It's like, okay, what's your whole deal about? She's like, I'm just in there to get my book, because like librarians' books are kind of sealed within a poison room, so I guess people won't have access. That's the whole point, so they won't have access to everything that's in the book. So obviously they go in there, and it's literally called the poison room because, well, it's poison. So Sylvia's reading her book, and she knows that, hey, this is where I die, and if you stay here with me, you'll die too. So Penny gets away. Obviously, he brings the book to Katie and them, so they know how to, forge a bullet that they ended up not using. Which begs the question, I feel like they went through a lot to introduce Sylvia, and obviously her past is a little iffy just because the fact is like who her dad is and everything. So I don't think her story's over. Not unless that's what this is all about, this evil or whatever that's coming. Maybe her dad's connected to it, because she's bringing because the fact is she can't be just some ordinary person, because it's like, yo, there's some like high level battle magic in a poison room, and Penny left her behind because he thought she was dying, but she could have been faking that, because we never actually got to see her actually die. We just saw Penny leaving. Obviously Penny's in a really messed up conditions, or he's in the infirmary and stuff like that. So I don't know. Next week is the season finale, and anything, obviously, I try to avoid it, but from the corner of my eyes, some glimpses of stuff. I'm very interested to see what goes on. Obviously, whether there's more to this Reynard and Persephone situation, about Alice, about fixing Fillory with Elliot and Quentin, but also the whole Margot and Finn situation. Obviously now Josh and the fairy world, like, is that all connected to Ember or not? Or is that just its own thing? Could that be what they're preparing for? Could it be that Fillory knows about what's coming? Obviously not the Lorians and the Fillorians, but the fact of the matter is, like, the fairies, is that why they took Finn's baby? Because they need, like, what was that whole thing about? Is that just for Ember's entertainment, for drama's sake? Or is there a lot more to that? And what's up with Sylvia's situation? I don't think she's dead. I think she played him. I think she's connected to this. So I'm very interested to see how this is all going to end. But really, that's all I want to talk about in this episode. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.